Yeah, we're live, 7:05. Look, I obviously set that up so that I could just rhyme something, right? We are live, and today's an exciting day because I got a call from Ben and Brian and their family, guys from the car farm. They actually took it over to a local dyno shop. Thank you. I forgot the name of the dyno shop, but we are going to be doing more stuff with them, so I'll make sure that I will be able to take care of them. But thank you very much for allowing those guys to come over and run on the chassis dyno. So it's a 1985 Dodge Omni GLH with 86 or 87 GLHS. Basically, we went from a T1 Omni to a T2, and actually the Omni, the way that I bought it, was at least a T2 because it had a 2.5 in it with a big front mount and a turbo upgrade and all that stuff. But that motor was hurt, so we took that out. And what I wanted to do, for you guys that have not been following the project, because there's lots of videos up on it, what I wanted to do was do a swap so that we could run the T2 GLHS from the Shelby version, the GLHS Omni. Cheers. Cheers to the Ben and Brian and their family from the car farm and the guys out at the dyno shop. So cheers to you guys. Awesomeness. Thanks for all the hard work. But the idea was to swap in the later T2 stuff into the T1 car and then get it California certified, get it licensed, registered, and all that. As a T2, I just wanted to be able to put the word intercooled on the back of it so that it would be official. But I was very excited because Ben called me and said, "Hey, Brian and I are going to take it over, and our family or our kids we're going to go over and take it over to dyno. We'll be able to run the dyno, see how all that's going to work." And so it was very, very cool. So they did take it over, and did she shred the dyno into pieces? Yes, from all the massive torque. Actually, it did make very good power eventually. So they're able to run it on the dyno, on the chassis dyno, and this was a Dynocom. So if anybody has any experience with a Dynocom, please get in contact with me because I got some questions. I've never run on one. I don't know how that compares to. We normally run on dyno jets, or there's a Superflow at West Tech. I've even run on I think Land and Seas or something. I've never run on a hub dyno. That stuff kind of came out after I was doing all the dyno jet stuff. And quite honestly, people want to argue about different dynos and stuff. I don't even care about that. All I care about is that we have the car, in this case on a chassis dyno, we have the car on the chassis dyno. It does something, and then we make a change, and then it does something different. That's all I care about. Oh, that's not a real number. That's not a real number. Whose number is the real number? They're all real numbers. Numbers are real. Numbers matter. And so if we put a car on there and run it and change the exhaust and we pick up power, then you picked up power. I don't care that it set it on a dyno jet or a Superflow or it set it on a loaded dyno or an unloaded dyno. Honestly, none of that matters to me. I just want to see some sort of delta. I just want to see a change. So it was very exciting today to get the call from these guys and say, "Hey, look, we're over there. We're running. We're doing stuff." And this was right when I was taking our puppies over to get their second round of shots. So I was over waiting in line to get their shots done today. But was excited to get back and hear from these guys. And especially on the initial runs, as always happens with project cars, there were issues. And there always are, because that's part of the deal. And your first time running on the dyno, there's also issues with that. There's issues sometimes with optical pickups or inductive pickups or measuring tire size or however you're doing your deal. There's always something. Only when you have a dyno up and running and run it every day do things tend to go smoother. So the Omni, when they were running it, the first thing that happened is this thing made it would make between 130 and 140 at the wheels. It kind of made exactly where we were kind of thinking that it was going to be, based on 175 horsepower stock output. Because this is a bone stock T2. It's just stuff that was laying around. It's an old factory turbo that's probably never been rebuilt. It's a completely stock exhaust. It's the stock intercooler. It's the stock intake manifold, stock cylinder head, stock short block, stock pistons. The only thing we did was put ring gap in it, and you lose 20 horsepower when you do that. That's my no you don't thing. So it's bone stock, and it was run on 91 or whatever pump gas they had there. It was run on that, run with a factory ECU. And so no changes, they didn't turn the boost up. They didn't do anything. In fact, in this case, it made 100 and between 130 and 140. They haven't sent me over the actual dyno results. I'm just going by the numbers that they gave me. They're sending me over the actual dyno files. So I just need to get the run viewer version for Dynocom, which I don't have. I have it for WinDyn, but I want to be able to, read and evaluate this stuff and kind of see what's going on. But again, I'm just looking for Delta, and I'm just excited that it's its first dyno day. I don't care that there were issues. I've been doing this way too long and have had all sorts of I've made all sorts of incredibly foolish mistakes. I've had all sorts of things just not go right. I've had, pickups go bad and just the motor go bad. I've just had all kinds of, you name it, the kinds of things that can happen. I've had that happen. So I know what it's like. And I know, and so, when somebody's like, well, we're at the dyno, but things are not going right. I'm like, look, you're preaching to the choir. You don't have to tell me that. I understand that. I've had more days that are like that than are days where I just go in and everything just works just perfect. In fact, probably can count those on one hand, maybe two, because I've been doing this a lot of years, but not very often do you just go and hook up a motor and everything just works perfectly. Something's going to happen, and it usually does. And so the thing made the power that it was supposed to, and I was very excited about that. And they said, but here we go, but it doesn't seem to be making the boost that it should. So this thing should be. And I want to make sure that I'm going to go ahead and do a search here. I just want to be able to talk about this correctly. Let's see. Okay, so because this is a T2, the intercooled version, what we have here is this thing will go to the normal driving around. Let's see, 86. E7 Turbo 2. So normally what this thing will do is it runs around at a peak of 9 pounds of boost. So that's what it will do. It will go into this, it will go to 11 pounds for 10 seconds. And then for every second that you don't have it in boost, it adds back to that clock. So it will run 11 pounds for a 10-second run. You kind of wish that was a whole quarter mile. In fact, that's not even a whole, as it turns out, it's not even a whole dyno pull on the chassis dyno in one gear, like in fourth gear. It's not, it takes longer than that. Remember, we're not making a ton of power. We're making 130 or 140 horsepower. So this thing what should happen ideally, at least what I think should happen, is if you're like, let's say you're in fourth gear and you nail it at 2,000 RPM and let this thing go from 2,000 to 6,000 RPM, this thing should immediately go up to 11 pounds, assuming that the knock sensor is not activated. It should immediately go up to 11 pounds, and then 10 seconds later should drop down to 9. The problem is we weren't seeing that. We were only seeing, according to Ben, we were only seeing 7 or 8 pounds. And we were never seeing the 11, and we weren't even seeing the 9. That is both good and bad. One, it's bad. I'd like to see it do the thing that I think it's supposed to do. I'd like to see it. Now, he has a boost gauge on there, and I don't know if that boost gauge is correlated with the map sensor for the ECU. It could be a pound off or whatever. Maybe that's a thing. But what I'd like it to do is, I think it's a really cool feature that it allows you to run this kind of higher boost threshold for a short period of time, and then cuts that back and says, okay, look, we don't want you running a wide open throttle like at 11 pounds for a really, really long time. We're going to cut you back, give it a chance to breathe, then we'll go back and let you do more. And I think that's fantastic. These things also have what's called an overboost, kind of a shutoff. So if you reach 14 pounds or 14.25, they're showing variances here. But if you reach 2 bar or 1 bar, basically, then what will happen is it will just shut off. I think that's what happens. And so what the Dodge engineers did was put a safety feature in there that if you lost a line or hooked it up incorrectly, or playing the let's fool the wastegate thing, that the computer will let you only go up to about 14 pounds, and then it'll say, look, that's enough, which is also cool. It's good that they put that safety feature in there. Probably has saved a lot of people. But so I don't know why it's not doing this higher boost level. And like I said, that's both good and bad. I want it to do the thing that it's supposed to do. But by the same token, I'm happy that it might mean that this thing will make even more power if we get another, couple of pounds of boost or whatever to make it do what it's supposed to do. That'll be good. And so if it can run 11 pounds for the 10 seconds and then drop back to 9, even if it's 9. If it's 9, it's higher than it is now, and it's 11, it's quite a bit higher than it is now. That would be even more power. That'd be fantastic. It also means that the motor that I put together, my very first one, actually worked, which was kind of cool. But there's more to that story. Let's see. We got to have a poll, right? Okay, should I do my 24-hour Super Richie Marathon where I'm doing 24 basically 1-hour deals all in a row with 24 different subjects, and we're going to be here 24 hours all night? Should I do that in March, like right away? So let me know. But so more on our story on the GLHS. So I wasn't doing that, and I wanted to do that. So, but again, first time out, this stuff was just thrown together with stuff that was laying around. The motor was thrown together by somebody who's never put one of these together before. I couldn't be happier with that kind of result. The other thing that they brought with them was a Mopar Performance Stage 2 computer. So the computer controls the boost, and also probably has different, I'm thinking it has different timing values and stuff in it. And different injector values, so it's adding fuel because it's definitely going to add boost, and that's exactly what it did. So one of the things that they were doing, one of the things that they did initially was they were checking to make sure that the turbo wasn't leaking or that it was responding and doing all the things. So they manipulated it to get it to, they took a signal, basically. They took control of the boost away from the computer. So I tried making a run like that, and the boost went way up. So they're like, okay, look, if the turbo's working, it's making boost, it's doing the thing they want to. They didn't even run a full run. So like, okay, so that seems to be working. And this thing seems to be fairly repeatable at this kind of power level. So let's put the Mopar Stage 2 computer in there and let's see what happens. And so they put that in, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It made a lot more power, a lot more boost. I think the boost went up to, I'm thinking that he was saying it was 12 to 13 pounds. And so it made about 200 at the tire. So it went up from 130 to 200, and it did, it's doing, adding the amount of power that it should add for the amount of boost that we're adding, and all that formula seemed to be working fairly well. And the torque numbers were way up, and I don't have graphs yet, so I haven't been able to look at them. And, I live and die by graphs, so I can't wait to see them. And hopefully the Dyno software will allow me to play with those and stuff. And so we'll be able to demonstrate some of that stuff. So it did, I like the fact that, the motor ran and did what it was supposed to do. It worked. They got a dyno session. It was good. They ran a Stage 2 computer, but, and here's the downside, while they were testing, this thing hurt a head gasket. So there's that. And here's the thing, again, that happens. I've had stuff break on me all the time on the dyno. So I'm like, again, that's to me, that's still a win. I said, I don't care that it hurt a head gasket. This particular motor had head studs in it, and it had a Felpro head gasket in it. So I don't think it was a Felpro. I don't think it was a strength thing. I don't know what it is because I don't know. Here are the things that I don't know. This was a factory ECU and then a Mopar ECU. I don't know what the timing is. The timing was set to the factory spec, just the factory position on the distributor. And then it has factory timing in the computer. Should run on 91, or that's probably 93 out there, I would imagine. So should run fine on that. I don't know what the air fuel was. I don't know what the timing was because we didn't log that. Obviously, I'm not there, so I would very much like to be there. So it looks like I might be flying out to build another motor, which is perfectly cool with me. I think it'd be fun. I'd love to go out there and spend more time with those guys. I hope that I get to go out there when it's warmer. Then I could obviously look for snakes too, and then the car can be painted and all of that, and then we could run some more dyno tests. But even if it just the other thing that remember that this, if you saw the videos of this thing going together, even though we used head studs and a new head gasket, neither the head nor the block were resurfaced, and that's something I really like to do. And because I was in hurry up mode when I was there for the 8 days or whatever that I was there to get this motor together and then in the car and running, and so that was my goal when I was there. Shortcuts were taken, and so especially if I'm putting something together for the long term, I'm pretty sure that the motor is still in good shape. The motor's going to come out. We're going to take it apart and see what's going on. Did it? It's not going to do what the 2.5 did, where it torched the chamber and torched the head gasket and did all that. We want to see what's going on. We'll fix whatever the problem was. I probably will take I will take the time to, if that block and everything is so good, we'll just resurface that block. We'll resurface the deck surface and resurface the head and then put it back together. And then if I'm going to resurface the head, probably we'll do a valve job and that stuff, just so that all that's right. Because before we did the Super Richie razor blade rebuild, and then also did we just cleaned the valves and lapped them in. So we could do a little bit more work so the thing is right. I'm not doing that because I think that that's really going to add any power. I think I would just do it because I want this thing to go together and be right so that I can do this kind of testing. But I want to do this kind of testing where I know all of those variables. Like I want to know, I would want the thing to do what it's supposed to do in terms of doing the boost, like I said, for the 10 seconds or whatever. And I'd like to, if I was going to run higher boost levels, like if I was going to run that stage 2 computer in anything for a test, I would probably put good fuel in it. I eventually want to do some tests with the 85. This is all stuff that I'm going to do on the engine dyno first, and so we'll see what happens, and we'll see where this thing wants to run on this little 84 motor, and then also on the 2.5. But again, I couldn't be happier. It's awesome that those guys went out of their way to help me out. And before I had been back to the car farm, they're guys that I'd only talked to on the phone from being part of this channel. And that, like I said, that's a great thing that's one of the great things about this, is that you get to meet new people, and it's kind of a cool deal. So it's very cool that Ben and Brian and their family and those guys were able to do this. And naturally I'm very excited and frustrated at the same time, not about the outcome, but about not being there, about not being able to, just be part of it, because it's a cool thing, especially on its first day, on its maiden voyage. I did get to drive it while I was there when we put it together, but the shifter was terrible and the alignment was off and it had all kinds of issues, but it did drive down the road. And so I counted that kind of as a win. So it was very exciting. So I am excited about the fact that it went together and it's running, and the motor did kind of what it was supposed to. It made the power that we were kind of thinking that it was going to. So all that's good. Hey, again, that's nothing but a win. So let's see what you guys got going on for tonight. Casey, what's going on? Omni Ryzen. Is it Omni GLH T2.5? Good evening, Alan. Posted this link to the Turbo Dodge pages. Boosted drummer, cash for clunkers. Medina, how much power do you think I can make with a 520 liter per hour wall burl on a 5.3 LS turbo? I don't know what the 520. Do you have it? Do you have your fuel pressure boost referenced? Because that's going to hurt the flow rate of the pump a little bit. Does anybody have any idea what that 520 will support? Has anybody used that in the real world? I worked at Land Seas and got to run my Metro on the showcase dyno. Made 114 at 16 PSI. That's a lot. Turbo Center, you got a 2011 MR18DE. Has a better head and bigger rods. Nice. Burns, I've been to the dyno 4 times, and every time something new pops up. It's true. It happens. It's running the tuna solid, so most of the work is there good. Out of the box, I have a problem with the billet tone wheel. The torque steer was horrendous. That was a main complaint about the chassis, and I really wish the wastegate was integrated too. So you guys are complaining about torque steer? Richard, what do you think about a cam? This cam for the 318, 223, 471, and a 107. As a cam reground for Mission Impossible 318. I don't know. I don't know what they're trying to do with it. I don't know what the goal is for that particular build, and all of the. I haven't followed it, so I don't know. I talked to David about it long ago when they were first starting, but I don't know what the goal was for it. I don't know what intake they're using or what carburetor they're using or what they have done to the heads. And also, I don't know what the end goal is. Is it to drag race this thing? Is it to street drive it? Is it like, what is it they're trying to get done with it? Any engine at max bore versus stock bore, all of the things being the same, what is the power increase due to compression increase from bore? Well, I don't know how much you're changing it, but you're changing two things. If you go up in bore size, you're changing displacement and you're changing compression, assuming that when you go up in bore size, you keep the same piston design, which if you're changing the piston, you can also change the piston design. So you can make the compression be anything that you want. 24 hours of testing a Mopar. We just did. Ben and Brian ran a Mopar today, and their kids. All things the same. Get the original horsepower, get the horsepower per cubic inch, and multiply it by the new displacement. It should be close. Although a little bit more because of valve shrouding, and actually a little bit less because if you kept the same cam and increased displacement, when you're doing it this little, it's not going to affect really anything. But as you go up in displacement, like if you go from a 350 to a 383, let's say, on a small block Chevy, and keep the same cam in it, you won't make the same specific output. The specific output usually will go down unless you've added cam timing, added compression, and if head flow stays the same, it becomes harder to make the same specific output. Todd, you got 4 units of blood? Nice. Get that bad stuff out, man. Get that used motor oil out. Get the good stuff in. I hope they use synthetic. Was this the head that torques the cylinder? No, this is a completely different motor that has nothing to do with that one. The head has this one has head studs in it already. I bought another XR8 T56 car, and there's barely any room anywhere at the front for a turbo. What would you recommend for the size of a separate oil and water container for a remote turbo? And so, I don't know about the cooler stuff, and I don't know about which pumps they're using for a remote turbo. There's another YouTuber making a cool intake for Vizard and Tony's small block Mopar build. I watched a couple of his vids. Seems like a good guy. Goal for Mission Impossible is 1 horsepower per cubic inch. They want to make 1 horsepower per cubic inch out of a 318. A 224 cam is, I mean, a 223 cam, it's going to be very easy to make 1 horsepower per cubic inch. It should make way more than that. Two-barrel carb will make it a little bit harder, but not impossible, because 318 horsepower out of a 2-barrel is not really terrible, especially if they use because they made factory ones that were 500 CFM. Turbo sensor, I found the problem. My fuel pressure regulator wasn't rising with boost, or my pump was not big enough. Pressure stayed at 40 psi at 20 psi boost, so you only had a delta of 20 psi of fuel pressure flowing. That's not good. Do they have well, obviously they're not trying to make 1 horsepower per cubic inch with stock parts if they have a 223 cam, because a 223 cam is not a it's not a stock cam. So you're saying they can only remove metal, so that regrinding the cam is the way that they got around the workaround for that? Did a Ford 2.3 with 8 plug head, 704 horsepower to the rear NC's housing, turbo glowing right, or yeah, I don't know. That's a lot of stuff. Well, I wanted to read you guys a comment. So I got a comment from somebody talking about centrifugal superchargers and how great they are. And I'm like, dude, you're preaching to the choir. I love centrifugal superchargers. I had serial number 001 Vortec on my car. So you don't have to tell me about centrifugal superchargers. You're preaching to the choir. But he said, well, I ran a centrifugal supercharger with an electric motor on my Barra, and it made, I'm going to do the math here. It made 1,850 horsepower at 1,500 RPM. Because he spun it up with the electric motor. And so it made all of this boost and all of this power. He told me it was some giant size centrifugal supercharger V33 or so, I don't know, something. So I'm just laughing. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. At 1,500 RPM in your Barra engine, you made 1,850 horsepower. Do you know how much torque that is? I did the math, by the way. I'm sure you guys are going to do the math. In fact, you guys should do the math. Do 1,850 horsepower at 1,500 RPM and tell me what kind of torque you come up with on a 4-liter Barra engine at 1,500 RPM. And so these are the kinds of comments that I get, which are just freaking awesome. I just love guys when they do that. They're only getting 200 CFM on their 2-barrel. That's going to make it a lot harder to get 300 horsepower from 200 CFM. When is the Omni 2.2 1,000 wheel horsepower video coming out? I think it's the second Tuesday after Never. LQ4 6-liter 317 heads, stock cam capable of 700 to 800 with a twin turbo or alone, cam swap needed. No, you can make 800 with a 6-liter because they'll make about 400 stock at the flywheel. And especially if you had a stock, well, an LQ4 is, do the later LQ4 cam because it's better than the early one. The early one is really is the same one that's in the LR4 and the LM7. So if you do the later LQ4, it's a better camshaft, or put any other stock camshaft in it besides that really, really small one, to put an LS1, an LS2, LS3, whatever. And with turbos on it, you can make 800. Did it have a billet block? It better have a billet everything. Yeah. Yeah, we're talking Barras tonight. We're talking about ones that made 1,850 horsepower at 1,500 RPM with an electric motor driven centrifugal superchargers for that immediate boost. Because we all want all of the boost at 1,500 RPM. Bench racing, exactly. What's the cam on the floor? That's an LS cam. My work truck makes 2,100 at 1,750, but that's a V16 quad turbo diesel cat. Cool. Burns, you need to redo your math. It's not 2,500. It's way more than that. So a good Barra, maybe 1,000 newton meters of torque. That would be way up there for a setup like mine with aftermarket turbo, not at 1,500. Yeah, Julius, there you go. Now you're getting closer. 6,477 foot-pounds of torque is what this guy is saying. Just awesomeness. No, because if you're going to make up a story, like don't make up a story where it's like 6 or 8 foot-pounds more than most guys would make. You might as well do it in orders of magnitude. What's more desirable, a V6 or an inline 6-cylinder? Well, what are you trying to do? Where are you trying to fit it in? Anybody want to sell a twin turbo setup for a 6-liter? Admiral, inline 6-cylinder is better all day, every day, except when you try to fit it in an engine bay where a long inline 6-cylinder doesn't work. And if you have an inline 6-cylinder that's like the 292 Chevy, where it has a terrible intake manifold and a terrible cylinder head, that's not the case. Kicking the tires. Maybe he was going to launch the space shuttle. Maybe he invented the space shuttle. Sykes, who's going high compression? I kind of would like to do that. We talked about that. If I was going to put together a rampage, a daily driver rampage, I probably would put the NA combination together. I would put the NA short block and then put the turbo stuff on. Richard, I was looking, I couldn't find one on YouTube that's credible. Have you ever done the lump port mod on the inline 6-cylinder? I have not. I would like to, but even at that, it's still a Siamese port head, and I don't think it's great. They have two 1,800 horsepower Barras that rev to 1,500 RPM on the space shuttle. That would power the space shuttle just about. Do you ever do dynamic compression comparisons? Every time I run a camshaft, I do dynamic compression comparisons. Every time we take a stock camshaft out and put an aftermarket cam in, we change the dynamic compression. But the important thing is that we change the power. I needed to double that number. Yep. Horsepower times 5250 divided by RPM. The Barra story. Yep, go all in. He did go all in, which I think is awesome. Have an 02 Ford Focus 5-speed, forged pistons and rods, stock Roush turbo kit. I remember you mentioning this setup and referred to it as a better option for the turbo spec. What would you recommend? I don't remember having a conversation about a 2002 Ford Focus. I'm trying to think what year mine was. I don't know what I'm not familiar with the Roush turbo kit. I've never run one of those. Bears down here sort of turned into Dyno Queen motors, and they make amazing power. Like we've seen 2,000 horsepower Bears, which is very impressive. It just doesn't happen at 1,500 RPM, and would immediately grenade itself if it tried to, unless, like somebody was talking about, unless you had a billet motor. A Barra is the 4-liter Ford engine that they have in Australia. We didn't have them in the United States. The 24-hour plan is me doing a 24-hour live feed marathon. It was originally an FMAX. Okay, an FMAX turbo kit I'm familiar with, and they work good. I had one on my Z-Tech Focus. 15,000 RPM would also be a lot, right? I'd like to see a 15,000 RPM Barra too. Or a 1,500 RPM one, either way. But he wasn't talking about 15,000 RPM because he was talking about how quickly he could get this thing to spool, because he was bragging about the fact that he was telling me how terrible it is to drive a centrifugal supercharger off of the crank, even with all the step ratios involved, that you drive it with an electric motor to get to spool up immediately, and how much better that is than a turbo, because he could then went into his dissertation about making all of this torque at 0 RPM or. When you're planning the 2.2 head and block, take a couple minutes to grind back something between the intake and exhaust valve. That piece of aluminum is 1/2 to 3/8 of an inch thick before water. It becomes a glow plug. Which head is that on? Is that on the G head or the swirl head? I use a pressure washer today to wash bricks. Man, that takes forever. "24 hours. It can't be 12 hours. It's not the 12 hours of Le Mans. It's the 24 hours. Rocket, 200 horsepower on a Mopar Stage 2 with a stock setup is good. My 880,000 mile 2.2 T2 with full bolt-ons and a custom tune at 22 pounds made, 225 wheel horsepower, 291 foot-pounds. So Rocket, that's a good point. This thing seemed to be making more torque than horsepower, which is, I don't understand why. This thing is rated. I want to make sure that I'm talking about the same thing. Let's see. because I think that the 2.2 T2 was rated at 175 horsepower and 175 foot-pounds. That's right? So I don't understand why on the chassis dyno we would be seeing more torque than horsepower, whatever the number is. I don't care what it is. But if the rated power output is, let's see, 86 has the fast burn head. Yeah, so it's supposed to be, the engine's rated at 175 horsepower at 5,200, which is, that's what Ben was saying, that it's, even if I asked him if they're revving it at 6,000, he said, yeah, but it's making peak power way lower than that. And the torque peak measured 175 foot-pounds from 2,200 to 4,800. So they must have been, my guess is that the factory was probably limiting torque production then, if they have that torque output for that long of an RPM range. So maybe that's why we're seeing that. So let me know, Rocket, if you know if that's the case. Because I was asking Ben about that. I'm like, why is it making so much more torque than horsepower? I don't even care what the numbers are. I just care that they're different. They're skewed differently. On a manual car, that's rare if it's rated the way that it's rated. But it must be that they were limiting torque. I don't know how they were doing it, by timing or boost, probably. Maybe they were limiting boost on the lower engine speeds. I'd love to hear some air-cooled VW stuff. I have done some air-cooled VW testing. What do you think about the 2020 GT500 engine and the power they're making with twin turbos, close to 1,600 horsepower crank on a totally stock engine with only adding boost and better fuel? I've never seen any numbers like that on a sealed engine. Titanic's four-cylinder steam motors put out 15,000 horsepower at 75 RPM. They were big motors. What would you do to a 5.3 to make good horsepower? There's only about 100 videos up on my channel to tell you how to do that. But the first thing that everybody does is a cam and springs. In the 24-hour video, I have some air-cooled VW stuff that I can share. Well, we do have some dyno results. I don't think I have the dyno results, the actual power numbers anymore, but I have some testing that we've done. Swirl head has a heart-shaped chamber with the offending alternate ignition point. Okay. But Kyle, what I'm trying to do with this one is have it be all stock. So I want to keep that in there. I might soften it a little bit just to make myself feel better. I don't want to have a modified motor. Otherwise, I would just put a ported head on there, a completely done over one with the chamber and everything. Richard, can you break down how to make 1,000 horsepower for my girlfriend who is mildly car illiterate? That's not a nice thing to say about her. She's probably a very nice gal. Yeah, you first make 500 horsepower NA, and then you add 14.7 pounds of boost with a turbo. Is the 2.2 David Vizard head tested yet? No. More torque than horsepower was a tractor. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Although having more torque with this thing would make it funner driving, though. Factory limit torque to prevent transactional breakage. We have a different trends in there, so that's not a problem for us. But they did do that, and they did that especially on the 2.5 stuff. Any idea how much you can safely mill off a Pontiac 6X-8 head? I don't know. But normally with cylinder heads, if you mill more than 30, you start running into intake fitment problems. How much larger a PSI spring should you use on your blow-off valve compared to your wastegate spring street application? I think you're thinking about this wrong. Your blow-off valve is going to open up under vacuum and not under boost, and it has boost in addition to the spring holding it closed. So it has everything holding it closed, and it only opens up under vacuum. And a lot of them have an adjustment nut and set screw on the top, so you don't have to worry about the spring that's in there. Whatever spring that they have in there, it's going to be boost pressure plus that spring rate holding it closed. Burns, did you on your SRT4? Did you put a rising curve in there? Because that's also one way to get these things. Like the 8 valves all have very mild cams in them, so it wouldn't surprise me to see these things. And because they're making, if you have something that makes peak power at 5,200, it's going to have more torque than horsepower. Because if it's making peak power there, the torque number is going to be the same as the horsepower number at 5,252. So whatever the horsepower number is, it's more than likely the torque number is going to be bigger below that. So I now can kind of understand why they're doing it. What we need to do is get these things to make peak power at a higher engine speed. I'm going to try custom cam on this engine, exhaust only from 220 with you should Turbo Sentra, you should not be concerned about the exhaust cam. You should be concerned about the intake cam. That's what's going to make power, not the exhaust cam. Minimum safe piston to head clearance with steel rods at 7,000 RPM. I like to have 30. How much turbo would you run on a slightly warmed over 5.9 Magnum for a towing application, fairly low boost? I would run the GT45 turbo on that. I don't know if Bear can do 1,800 horsepower, 2,000 RPM. Well, none of those were the numbers that we talked about. It was 1,850 at 1,500 RPM. And a 220 cam at 50, again, you should be looking at the intake side and not the exhaust side. But a 220 cam at 50 is kind of like a Type R cam. Not applicable to the 2.2, and general one's better for horsepower with a dual exhaust, and X-pipe and H-pipe or no crossover. It honestly doesn't make that much of a difference. What you're looking for in an X-pipe or an H-pipe is actually sound. It doesn't make a big difference in power. The guys from Engine Masters tested those recently, and there was not a lot to be gained there. And somebody that's telling you that some sort of crossover is going to add a whole bunch of power has not tested it. It sounds really good, and that's the reason that I would put it on there, but not because of power. Richard, I've heard you say that the power and torque cross at 52, and I'm thinking on a dyno graph. Well, but they always cross there. They have to, because the formula for horsepower and torque, they're mathematically related. The formula is horsepower equals torque times RPM divided by 52. So they have to cross there. They can't not cross there. It took me a long time to come to grips with that, because I'm like, but not on a Formula One motor, right? Not on a top fuel motor. And they're like, no, you don't understand. It doesn't care what kind of motor it is. It's just math. Stupid camera. The truth. All I go by are not speculation, which is what you're going by. I go by actual dyno results. And since they ran the X pipe and an H pipe and a whatever no pipe at all, and showed the difference in power, there was very little power from any of those things. The sound quality changed dramatically. Like an X pipe sounds different than an H pipe does, and it sounds different than having no exhaust. But you shouldn't go looking for power in these things in the exhaust. I know what reflected waves do. I understand all of that, but there's not a lot of magic there. It's not for power, it's for efficiency. Oh my gosh. Tell me what the difference between those two things is. Is it going to get better fuel mileage? Recently had a 347. I'm just going by the dyno results. I I was really curious when they did that test because I've talked to Brule. I'm like, you guys did that exhaust test, right? Because we put an X pipe on our Mustang, on our World Challenge Mustang, and it sounded a lot better. What it really needed was a real motor behind the X pipe. It needed a lot more compression and a lot more camshaft and a bigger motor and a better engine builder. It needed all that stuff, but it sounded a lot better with the X pipe. But it didn't make a whole bunch or maybe any more power. Coyote motor, so X pipe might be the way to go for sound. Yeah, a Coyote motor will sound really good with an X pipe. Matt, what's up? Yeah, Turbo Sentra, if you have cams that would be near a Type R kind of cam, 225-ish or so at 50, you can make lots of power with those. You can certainly make all the power that you're trying to make with that, as long as you have a reasonable amount of head flow and the intake manifold is the right runner length, and you just add boost and away you go. Should I do my 24-hour Super Richie Marathon in March? 80% are saying, yeah, who says no to that? What kind of freaking knuckleheads? Matt, you want a low-rise hood? Well, you could just put the stock HO intake manifold back on there. That'd be good, right? 4.5 inch runners. Those are pretty short, yeah. Those are probably shorter than you need. Your voice sounds deeper when I'm not late listening at 1.5 speed. I do tend to talk pretty fast. I'm already kind of talking at 1.5 speed anyway. So the Omni's still in the factory ECU? Yeah, we had a stock ECU on it. Could it be a limp home knock sensor? No, it made the power that it was supposed to. It just has no head gasket now, or a broken one. I would suggest instead of looking for power on your test, you do some pulse testing. Pulse testing actually shows in power, but that's okay. Temperature test. So what temperature do you want us to measure? Do you want us to measure external temperature of the exhaust, sustainable power in daily driving settings? So please explain what you mean by that, and not just the drag racing aspect. In fact, I'm not a drag racer. If I were to be classified as something, it probably would be road racer or land speed racer and not drag racer. So none of the things that you said there are in any way accurate. Why didn't my dyno graph read horsepower and torque crossing at the normal 5252? Was it in the configuration of the dyno? Yeah, Nathan, what people often do is when they overlay horsepower and torque, they overlay them on different scales. They have to both be on the same scale. then they will cross at the normal rate. And that's the way that I like to look at it, because it shows what the torque curve, what's happening while the horsepower curve is happening. That's the way that I do it. I don't ever show, and I see this all the time, and it drives me nuts. It makes me want to strangle people. They show them at different things, and so it looks like the torque is crossing somewhere else, but people get confused, and they shouldn't do that. Turbo sensor, yeah, space is a problem for intake runner length. What would be a good rear-wheel drive manual trans for a maximum performance 2.2? You'd have to do an adapter probably for a real high horsepower deal. But they made that motor in rear-wheel drive form in the trucks, so you could use that transmission. They had manual transmissions for those. Again, I'm very, very familiar with reflected waves and scavenging. I understand how exhaust systems work. I understand how different header configurations. I've made many adjustable headers, tested lots of exhaust systems. I understand how all of that works. All I'm saying is, in a test where we tested these, they did very little in terms of changing the power output, but did change the noise. And that's why people put them on. What's the cheapest, easiest aftermarket ECU system these days? I don't know. The one that I use is a Holley. Richard, when you get back in the 2.2, there's a PT Cruiser lifter spring upgrade. I don't know about the spring upgrade. I have seen the lifter thing. I would probably do an aftermarket spring if we're going to rev these things, if and when we do, with something other than the stock camshaft. Ideal for the 24-hour marathon, how you prep the Mustang engine or chassis for the Silver State? Yeah. And I did it because I did it for so many years. I did it differently on a number of years and did it incorrectly a couple of times with almost very dramatic and very final results. Aside from typical upgrades, how would you improve the Mopar 2300 Commando or 273 Commando engine? You wouldn't have to do anything other than, heads, cam, and intake, those kinds of things, or make it bigger or add boost to it. I'm a drag racer. I tune at the track. That's good. Roush M90 and M90 are not comparable. They're not, I don't think. Would you recommend the blowers now? Because I heard you say doubt they make the power. Just asking me for a purchase. My comparison was that the Eaton M90 on the 3200 is not the same as that Roush M90 that they use on the 4.6. And guys that are making lots of power with the 4.6 Roush M90, the power that they're making is not, they think that, it's just M90. Well, but it's a whole different blower. And so the reason that they're making that is because it is a different blower. Rocket, I do plan on doing, I'm going to do my own windage tray or crank scraper. I want to improve the oiling system. It definitely needs a kick-out pan and stuff on it. If I recall correctly, the Stage 2 GLHS ECM commands 22 to 24 degrees at max boost. The Mopar Performance one, you can watch it with a snap-on scanner. Those old Dodge ECMs have a lot of data available on the scanner. The Dakota manual that goes with the 2.5 is not strong. I don't know anything about that transmission. I don't think I've ever seen anything on it. That's why we were saying that you need to adapt it to something that would be strong enough, a T56 or. What was the direct connection for my old GLH? I know it had that intercooler top mounted, but it was a chip or a different CPU. I don't know. Direct connection did have stuff. They had a top mount intercooler, which obviously is not a great idea. They had upgrade kits for those. They had the stage 2 computer. I think a 40 ounces grind will get you close to 224. It depends on what you're starting with. Normally they can get like 15 to 18 degrees, I think, when they do a regrind on a camshaft, is what the guys from San Diego were telling me. So I don't know what you're starting with. Yeah, the puppies are definitely barking. Yeah, Nathan, no problem. He's just, like I said, he's just not putting them on the same graph, on the same axis. The truth, yes, we know. I know what an X pipe does. I know what an H pipe does. I understand all of that. Yeah, I know that you want certain things to happen. What I'm saying is, when they're actually tested, here are the dyno results, and the change was very little in power. Yeah, they're very excited. They're probably wrestling with Milo. Yeah, Norm, it is interesting that people will continue down their theoretical path when confronted with actual results. Look, I know you want these things to all be true, and they might all be true, but what you're doing is trying to extrapolate to the end result that we already have. Just look at the results. It's really simple. Yeah, the puppies are nuts. They do the exact thing that you don't want them to do in every situation. I ran a crank scraper on my 2.2 and did road course stuff with it, along with an oil cooler. Never had any lifter clatter overheating. If you aerate the oil, that can become problematic, especially with hydraulic lifters. Richard, in your experience, does rod stroke ratio noticeably affect durability and longevity? I don't know. What I'm doing on the dyno doesn't really show durability, because I've never done like a 24-hour endurance test or that kind of thing. Most of in the range that we see for the kinds of motors that we're running, that's not going to be an issue. If you're building a NASCAR motor that has to run wide open throttle at 9,000 RPM for 500 miles, that might be something that you would consider. If you're going to get a junkyard LS, that shouldn't ever even be on your radar. Matt, I agree. The X-Pipe sounds better. I remember the first time I heard an X-Pipe was way back when I was running World Challenge, and the AER Mustang we were racing against was Rob Fellows, which is Ron Fellows' younger brother, was racing that car, and he had somebody that knew how to build motors built his motor. It was really high compression, and it had an X pipe on. That thing used to rip, and I'm like, I remember looking at my buddy Bernie. He's like, "We need our car to sound like that." I'm like, yeah, we're so far away from our car sounding like that, but we could put an X pipe on it, and that would help. Doria's open road racer ran Dr. Gas X pipe, 3-inch exhaust with a fairly tame 500 horsepower 350 at 7,000. The car sounded pretty cool. I didn't remember that Doria's car had an X pipe on it. That's cool. And that car, what car was in it when you were? Matt has really good stories about riding in that. He's nuts. And riding in the Silver State in a Corvette that went 200. And he's trying to reach down with his foot and kick the speed limiter chip out because it had an MSD in it, I think, right, Matt? And it had an MSD and it had a rev limiter on it, and it was stopping them from going as fast as they wanted to go. So he's trying to, while they're going 200, probably not wanting to unbuckle himself, which is smart, trying to get the rev limiter chip that plugs into the MSD out of it so that it will continue to rev. Why was the top mount intercooler not a good idea? Normally because all of the heat radiates up out of the hood, and normally they don't have good airflow down through a scoop and down into a pressurized engine compartment. That's why top mount, like in Subarus, and I had one in my Sprint Turbo. They're just not nearly as good as a front mounted one. Todd, you're in the market for a new dog. That's good. On my 2.2, I chewed up 2 5-speed manual trans and finally switched to an automatic. Did you have a shift kit in it? And did you take it off? Any sweet jumps? One old web page is Gus Mahomes. I've been to all of the 2.2 pages to try to get as much information as I could to learn about them. 88 T1 525 was a weak trans. Yeah, this one has a 523 in it. It had a 568 that came out of it. Way back, we saw 145 horsepower dyno jet with a stock T2 GLH Omni. So you guys actually ran a stock one, Kyle? That's cool. So Burns, you're running a 223 at 50. That's right in the Type R range. Matt, yep, it was a 7,000 RPM chip. We wanted to keep going. It would go faster. That car was fast, especially for that. Because what motor was in it when you guys were going that fast? It'd be cool if you could run a motor at 6,300 RPM for 24 hours straight to see if it holds up. One of the problems with that actually is the cooling capacity, having enough water to because that's a lot of that's a whole bunch of BTUs. Turbo sensor rod ratio. No, don't go down the rod ratio thing. That's not a thing. Exhaust reflections, power differences are tiny. Actually, exhaust scavenging is a big thing, but not so much that far down into the exhaust. It's a big thing for headers and for collectors, but becomes less pronounced farther down in the exhaust. Well, Chrysler ran 2 cars for 24 hours over 120 miles an hour, both 2.2 turbo cars. Cool. I wonder what they did to them. Merge collectors are a thing. Yes, they are. We played a lot with collectors design when I did Engine Masters. It was because it was one of the things that you could play with. That motor was an old boat motor. Dory had a Traco motor that was from Marine Application. Went ahead and tossed it in the old Sean Rowe Bridgestone supercar. I remember racing against that car. That car was very fast. Well, certainly was faster than my Mustang was. Richard, do you see many 460s in the junkyard? I have seen a few of those, yeah. Justin, Australia's in the house. Richard, I have an 80s 454 with peanut port heads and stock crank and pistons. I have a Summit 1320, 540 lift. Like to see 600 horsepower. Will it get you there with how much boost? Casey, that's a lot from a merge collector. I'll be building 2 engines and testing them with different cams. Cool. Yeah, Todd, like yourself, I've always had a dog, so I'm feeling complete without hearing paws across the hardwood floor. Yeah, it is. They're amazing. Let's do a test at 100% exhaust valve size head on an Ellis head, like a 40 millimeter intake, 40 millimeter exhaust, like on F1 and Porsche turbo race heads. So you're telling me that a Formula One motor has the same size exhaust valve as it has an intake valve? I'd find that hard to believe. And if you're looking for, if you want to look at how important an exhaust valve size is, look at pro stock motors. Yeah, Todd, I got you. I got the incomplete thing. Turbo Centra, I know. I got you. I feel you. Richard, no shift kit at the time. I didn't check to see if one was available. Richard, that's what I was trying to explain. Is a big jump from the factory 227 and 172, 172 at 50. Yeah, that's not very good. Todd, happy to help, man. 2 endurance cars are supposed to be stock. I think that they could run 120 miles an hour. The thing I would worry about is I would worry about oiling on those cars, and then I'd worry about the heat buildup too. I bet they ran them on race gas. Have you tested resonator tube mufflers on the dyno? Wondering if they added pulse tube causes any flow. What's a resonator tube muffler? Have you ever run an SHO Taurus motor on not on the engine dyno, on a chassis dyno a lot? Julius, there are differences between the earlier and later 460s. How much ring gap is needed for 14 pounds? 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. I played with my turbo manifold collectors. The only real difference I saw was going from a T3, T4 flange to a V-band that netted something. People have asked me about that. I've never tried a V-band exhaust housing turbo, though. It's a lot of math and voodoo. So if people are making the same size intake and exhaust valves, the first question is, if they're doing that on a production motor, you need to ask yourself why. And I guarantee you it's not power. I guarantee you. So we'll go ahead and close our poll at 81%. We're going to take that as a yes. Attack. They're both in attack mode. At least they're attacking each other, or they might be attacking Milo. Poor guy. It's like, man, don't these guys ever run out of energy? Two more minutes. I know, Todd. I feel you. Milo goes with me everywhere. The puppies don't yet, but Milo goes with me everywhere. I made the ramp for him now, but I before was just helping him in and out of the back of the truck. He just rides around in the back of the truck everywhere I go. He goes to the store with me. He just sits in there. I took him to when I went to get stuff for the puppies at the vet, Milo went with me in the truck and just sat out there. And the people in the vet were like, "Is that your dog out there?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Does he just stay there? There's other dogs walking around." I'm like, "Yeah, no, he's cool. He's just gonna sit there. He may talk to him, he may say hi or whatever, but I said, if I take him to the store, he just sits there. If I'm in the store buying stuff, he just sits in the truck. Sometimes he just lays down, waits till I get back. He just wants to be with me, and he wants to be with us. He's part of the family. Nathan, happy to help. Pro Stockers can't waste intake valve space for exhaust. Exactly. If they could just get rid of the exhaust valve, I think that they would. I watched a video recently on 5-valve engines. It was F1 tech carried over. It didn't work as well as hoped, but they can rev. Yeah, they went to 5-valve stuff. The Ferrari that I had was a 5-valve motor, and that makes it cool. And it had titanium rods too, I think. But which is cool. But is it really better than 4-valve stuff? Ever considered building a draw-through turbo setup? I am going to test the draw-through turbo setup. And I actually think, Kyle, that people would be beside themselves if I put a positive displacement supercharger on the 2.2. I think that they would like that even more than on the turbo testing. 7875 or an 8082 for an LQ4 tow application. I definitely pick the smaller turbo. Tomorrow's the first F1 race of the season. I haven't sat and watched the Formula One race in a lot of years. Lisa and I used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning because that's when they came on. And we would come out and we would curl up and watch the race together. Nathan, you're considering buying a dyno? I remember the supercharged kit for the 2.2s. I think people would like that more. It's not going to make any power. It's not gonna do as well as a turbo, but people tend to like that better. But a little M45 or something on there would probably be good. Or I could put an M62 from like a Bonneville or something on there. Aussie Speed does some draw through stuff. I can always have some stuff sent to you for advertising purposes. The draw through that I'm definitely going to do is I'm going to do a Super Richie Crown turbo kit for the L series motor. Richard, are you planning on having guests for the 24-hour? I'm not going to have guests at my house for that. I'd like to see a Kenny Bell on the 2.2. The idea wouldn't be to make a lot of power. If we're doing that, we would do that with a turbo. It would just be to put a positive displacement blower on there. My 2.2 was supercharged, 66-inch blower, and downdraft rubber carburetor. You can log them remotely. No, the problem always is going somewhere else. The internet quality is never good. Like the problem I have at West Tech. Here I'm hardwired in and I can make it work. I'm so embarrassed to be Australian. You should not be. Street outlaws are in Australia currently. They've been 2 days of racing. The American street basically won every race except for 2. That well, they do what they do. They're pretty good at what they do. But Australia is awesome. I would much rather go to Australia than go to see the Street Outlaws guys. I still have an M62 I bought 20 years ago for my 2.5T, but sold the car before I got around to it. What M62 did you get? Did you get one from like the Bonneville? The blower kit was a direct connection deal, yep. Eddie Ingersoll campaign a draw through. Was his turbo thing a draw through? Make a 4Runner video? Like an off-road one or something? My son has a Jackson Racing M45 on his 2000 Miata. I had one of those on a Focus, and then a 62. Adapting the 3800 blower on there. That's a little on the big side. How do you make more power from a big V6 draw through turbo? Make it a blow through and then put an intercooler on it. Cam, ported heads, all that stuff. Bigger turbo. So 79 Duke Regal Sport Coupes. I remember the hot air motors. Boy, the dogs are going nuts. I think that the Chevrolet offered that turbo 3.8 liter in the Monte Carlo, right? They did that also. Hot air turbo. That's why I want to do the Crown one. What they did was they did a draw through using one of the stock carburetors, which I think is going to be kind of limiting. We probably have to put something else on there, but it will just be interesting. Even if it's only 6 or 7 pounds or whatever, it would be kind of cool. What was the final result of the large versus small intercooler? I have an intercooler video up where we showed an intercooler upgrade and showed what happened. When will Coyote swaps be available, affordable? I don't think they're going to be. I wish that there was more technical stuff on the combinations that they're using, and then also what they're doing when they're trying to get these things to run down this track. And on that note, it is time to go. I've been here a long time, an hour and 24 minutes. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will be back in the morning.